All right, so hi everybody. Welcome. The webinar is about to begin. This will be a Q&A session that will be recorded and will last a maximum of 60 minutes. This recording will be available on MyTESOL 2 to 3 weeks after this event. So we'll wait just maybe a moment more for people to join and we'll get started. Thank you for coming on a rainy Friday, at least here in Eastern Pennsylvania. There is a glitch with the Zoom. For some reason, people are also being named Michael O'Neill, so you can rename yourself to your name. It's kind of like a John Malkovich situation, but yeah, so sorry about that. I'm not sure how that happened, but technology is always the bane of human existence. So just to let you know. Um, okay, so the International Teaching Assistant Interest section is pleased to present this webinar Q&A titled Research-Grounded ITA Assessment and Language Development Resources. Our speaker today is Dr. Elena Cotos. Dr. Cotos is an associate professor of applied linguistics in the Department of English at Iowa State University. She is also the associate dean for professional development and the founding director of the Center for Communication Excellence in the Graduate College. Bridging corpus-based analysis of written and spoken academic genres, pedagogy, and technological applications, her research agenda has informed the development of educational programs, curricula, instructional materials, and computer-assisted learning and assessment tools focused on English for academic purposes. We are very pleased to welcome all of you to this webinar. My name is Mike, and I will be your moderator for this event along with my colleague Ava. And now, it is our pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Elena Cotos.
Thank you very much. I really feel very, very honored to be invited here for this Q&A and have that little recording. It is an unusual still format for me when you prepare something ahead of time and then have to interact, but I really appreciate the interactive aspect of the webinars. I think it's really a great opportunity for people to voice their ideas, to serve like this platform can serve as a springboard for current practices, potentially future practices, drawing on our experiences and expertise. I look forward to learning from you all. I want to thank you for joining today. I see familiar names here in the chat, so thank you everyone for joining. It is gloomy here in Ames, Iowa too, but we're all inside. Let's enjoy each other's presence and interaction. So please feel free to open up for questions. I'm more than happy to share what you want me to share.
This is not a question, just a comment. You're talking about the pre-recorded. I'm so glad it was pre-recorded because you had so much data, so much information. And every time you said, you may want to pause here, I certainly did. And I think it was very helpful to have the recording ahead for I don't know, for your particular project in particular. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Cynthia. I know it's dense. It's just bridging the, as Michael said, the corpus type of approaches, and also building in those statistical analysis of data and looking at the, trying to dissect the linguistic features tends to be heavy. So like, if I talk about this too much, they will get bored and never join the webinar. But if I just, put highlights in there and whoever's interested can pause and look deeper and then they can follow up with questions. So thank you. I appreciate the comment.
I guess I have a question. Just because you did cover so many different language functions, how do you prioritize? Like, I feel like there are so many different activities. So, like, do you have any activities that you've liked to do that target multiple functions that you found to be just really engaging or motivating to the students you've worked with?
Yeah, so I will step back to say that it's been a while since I myself have taught those courses because of my admin role and stuff, but I'm working very closely with our ITA program. And many of you probably know Lily Compton. She's done a lot of like innovation to the program. The in terms of activities and choosing the language functions, I will connect that to our assessment. That's the oral English certification test. And you know how on one of the slides, I can't remember which slide now, but I have that example of our question set. Like we have test items that are organized as question sets for our raters for the OECT. And we're using the OPI ACTFL format, and we have those, the phases with the probing and level checks and all that. So some of the functions are more characteristics of higher levels, like, if you were to hypothesize or if you were to kind of think of more advanced options of solving a certain problem, then those would be in the higher levels. And the more, functions like description and comparing would be in the lower level. So at Iowa State in our program, we have 4 courses. Well, it's under the same course umbrella. It's the course itself is called English for Teaching Purposes. And so we have 3 levels. The lowest level is an A, and then we have a B, C, and then we have a D in increasing based on language proficiency. So, speaking of activities, when the instructors design those, they're looking at functions that need to be acquired and effectively used at the level that the students are at. So the activities are often working as a, let's say, as a preparation ground for the level checks. But then they also, so let's say if it's the same topic as we have it in our question sets, we have 3 types of items on 3 different topics in each question set. So it could be that it's the same topic for all 3 levels, but then the level of difficulty increases with a change in function. So in a lower level, we may ask them to narrate, and then a little bit higher, we may ask them to, or design activities where they will be comparing and contrasting, or they would be doing something. So that's how we try to align and make decisions about which functions are more relevant at what point in instruction that we need to teach.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, please feel free to let me know if I'm not entirely addressing the question. And I'm always aware of the things that we usually have in mind. And sometimes we think everybody has that background, and no, people don't really have that background. So if I am making assumptions when I explain something, and if it doesn't really quite make sense, please let me know. Say, hey, stop. Can you elaborate on this one here? Because we don't have this kind of practice. It's different for us. So please feel free to interrupt and ask for clarification.
I had a question about like the methodology part. So when you were recording the participants, it says that you had like a portable device that you would use to kind of track them. And I was wondering, like, was that logistically challenging in some ways, or like would the participants and the students kind of shift the interaction based on that, or did they get kind of used to it, or like how is that maybe a variable in some ways?
That's a wonderful question. So when we got the institutional, so as any research that we're conducting, we need to have approval from our institutional review board here at Iowa State, and people at other universities have their own units like that. So it was part of something that we put in that approval. And we had students, before we start the research itself, we gave them the informed consent, and we told them what is going to happen and how. What we did is also we tried this out even before actually launching into data collection, because Well, we were not sure. Is the quality of audio going to be sufficient? Is the student behavior a variable per se, right? But to answer your question, we did not really see students changing their behavior in the classroom because their TA was wearing that little thing.
Oh, they're okay. They were wearing it. That's actually really
Yeah.
cool. That makes it,
Yeah,
I think,
they had a little
easier.
thingy here, barely noticeable. And so, yeah.
That's really good to know because I was observing some ITA sessions at my institution and I was like kind of awkwardly looking across the room trying to listen in and I just realized like this is not a good way to do it unless I follow
Mhm.
the ITA around, but then it's also kind of awkward, so that's really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and these practical issues when you're trying to do research with many participants are very important, so that I appreciate the question.
I have a sort of a practical question on a program level. Do
Mhm.
you at Iowa State use the TOEFL for sorting students across
Yep.
levels? Oh, okay. Would you
Yes.
be willing to share how you organize it?
Let me put a quick link here in the chat. We have a on our website, we have a dedicated section of our website that's the oral English certification test. So let me put that in the chat real quick and I will address your question. So for the OECT, this is the test that the students or ITAs need to take so that we can make decisions and help departments actually make decisions as to what kind of responsibility or job duty they may have, right? So some of the students, depending on the scores that they bring when they apply to Iowa State, may be exempt. So if you click on the page that says testing policies and stuff like, let me again put the link here in the chat. Over here. So if you scroll a little bit further down, you will see OECT exemptions. So we have a list of score bands for speaking and listening that may qualify a student for an exemption. And it depends. Our OECT test is made of two components, is the oral proficiency interview, and then there's the teach simulation. And there students may be exempt based on their scores either from both the OPI and the teach, or they could be exempt from only OPI or only teach based on the scores. So that's the score bands are there. And if they're exempt only from the OPI, for example, that we consider that a partial exemption. And we still want them to take that part of the test. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I just have a quick practical follow-up. So do they take
Uh-huh.
this exam upon entrance to the university or after a few semesters?
Great question. Most or the heaviest traffic for the OECT is typically at the beginning of the fall semester when we have new incoming students. So the way it works, like procedurally, when the students receive an offer admission to Iowa State, the that letter tells them that they have a teaching assistantship appointment, right? So they're also offered a teaching assistantship, and because of that, they need to take the oral English certification test and link to the information that we provide. That information also goes out from the office, ISSO, International Student and Scholars Office on campus. They usually send a package with lots of materials that are important for international students, and our information is in that package as well. So students we tell them to come to campus, a week or two before, and we actually start the registration process way before they even get to campus. So we have a system Actually, it's a very neat system. We call it RPLAT, Rater Platform, but in fact, it's more than just the Rater. It's a platform that allows students to register for the test, to choose the precise, because the test, we need to have them come 1 hour before their scheduled test. And during that hour, they select a topic for the teach. We give them materials on the topic for the teach. They spend an hour preparing their teach presentation, which is only 5 minutes in the actual test, but we give them time to kind of give them the opportunity to prepare content-wise. So, and then the OPI is about half an hour the most. So they need to choose their test time way ahead before they come to campus. Logistically, it's complicated, but we worked out a very good system over the years. So once students register in our plat, our raters who are assigned to the days of rating have in their accounts, they have the students already. So when they start rating, they choose the student ID, and the rater platform, that aspect of the RPLAT, has the rating criteria, has the scoring for each question, has space for them to leave comments or sort of feedback, because we use that if students come to us and say, well, can you tell me how I did? You know, I got the score, but can you tell me more? Why am I level 3? I thought I did better, you know, things like that. So we have those for both speak and teach. There's other features that are more linguistically oriented, say, you know, having to do with fluency, having to do with grammar, having to do with whatever is in our assessment criteria. And I think I'm deviating from the subject of your question.
No, that's great. I didn't want to ask too many practical things because your research is so interesting. But thank you for sharing generally how you guys work at Iowa State. That's helpful.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, they take the test as soon as they get to campus, but they're able to schedule their test and learn about it way before that.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for asking the question, Jamie.
If I could ask a question. First of all, thank you for the wonderful webinar. I'd read Cotos and Chung and really loved it. And it was great to then get insight into the ETS report, which I'll be looking up. I have sort of two related questions, if I could. You know, the field has been moving away from using, you know, like monolingual adults as controls. And so I was curious if, and you were really ahead of this, right? And looking at what ITAs are doing. So I was curious if you could just give us some insight into your thinking at the time about why you used international teaching assistants as your participants for looking at what classroom discourse is like. And then also I'm curious, did you notice anything there in the TOEFL data about that was like, you know, learner acquisition specific, any interesting trends?
Great questions. So to address your first question, I will say that the motivation for this research was really the desire to improve the practices that we had in-house. When I first joined the graduate college, I joined as a program coordinator for the ITA program. And at the time, Iowa State was still using the old speak teach test, which I don't need to speak to the choir here, right? Even back in 2009, it was outdated. So I developed the OECT based on, you know, what the research was advising, but also I had experienced, I'm a certified rater, actual rater, so I went through that training and I had a very good understanding of how that goes, and I figured that that is really applicable, you know, the focus on using language functionally in appropriate ways to accomplish certain tasks. I felt like this is very appropriate for the ITA assessment context. So this is kind of how we started. And but I did not have anything about, well, what is it really like in the classroom, right? So we don't want to kind of top down teach. We want to know from the grassroots, right? And at the time, speaking to this monolingualism and, the native speaker is the standard. Well, not necessarily. There's a lot of research out there that says that's not necessarily the case. And we shouldn't really teach someone to become native-like, but rather efficient in communication. So to inform what we would be doing in the OECT, and also how that would trickle down to our instructional practices, I was really interested in investigating the discourse of the classroom. And of course, that is something that aligns with my general research agenda because I focus a lot on discourse analysis and genre-specific discourse analysis. And people typically think of genres as the written genres, academic, professional, but written. And spoken genres are much more difficult to get a hold of and analyze. So I was fortunate enough to get this grant from ETS. Another motivation was, and especially because of that intersection with ETS and TOEFL, there's literature out there validating different aspects of TOEFL and saying, well, it's a very good test for admissions purposes. It tests what it's supposed to be testing in terms of academic language, well, English ability to use English for academic purposes. But using English for teaching purposes is academic, but is much more specific than academic. So those claims and I was more involved with ITA world back then, and people were not sure whether they should use TOEFL IBT, for example, to as a kind of a threshold, say if like the way we're using at Iowa State now, right? If they have these scores, then they could be exempt, or maybe can we place them directly based on their scores into certain levels. And I wasn't confident that I personally was not convinced that we could do that yet. So that was the other motivation for me to look at the discourse that they actually produce, see what characterizes that discourse, and then also see if TOEFL tasks elicit those language functions that we expect students to be producing in the classroom. And yeah, as you saw in that video presentation, there's some good signs, definitely. But the functions are really very much dependent on what the test items are asking for. So they are asking for similar functions. I mean, TOEFL, but topic-wise, they're different, and therefore the linguistic realizations are different as well. But the functions are there, most of them. They don't have instructing, which I was not surprised to see that is the most prominent function. And when I was working on, when we first tried to apply the knowledge framework, it was just very difficult because it was too simplistic. And some of the, like I said in that recording, some of the same language choices were given as examples for different functions in different knowledge structures. So that was very confusing, especially when you tried to analyze data, like look at this excerpt and the next and the next and the next and try to annotate. And that wasn't so. Where I'm going with this is that I hope I addressed your questions, but I think I'm going a little bit beyond that to say, with a research project like this, I think my overall intent was to kind of kill several birds with the same stone, right? I had this data set that could serve the purpose of informing learning about the classroom discourse that is not, I mean, there's studies out there that talk about teacher discourse, and those are professionals, and most of them are not necessarily international, right? So I wanted to do this domain knowledge analysis of the genre of these curricular genres. And then from there, I was also able to apply what I learned to see, well, can we make informed decisions if we decide to still use TOEFL IBT tests for ITA screening or ITA placement? And then that certainly goes in the application in instructional settings. That will depend on how you guys have things set up at your universities, right? At our institution, like I said, we have these level-based English for teaching purposes courses, and so our assessment, the way we assess their language and the way we train them to be effective ITAs, effective instructors in the classroom, it's all kind of a thread. It's not to say that this is the functions are the only things we teach them, right? But there's certainly much more to that. There's strategies that communication strategies that they need to be using. There's other things that we need to be teaching them. But as we teach that, we need to make sure that the tasks integrate certain functional language use.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I think you articulated really well, right? The value of looking at, right, highly effective non-native speech. And also say, I also wasn't surprised, but I did gasp a little bit when I saw the chart with instruction on, the TOEFL versus actual classroom. So really helpful data.
Thank you, Kyle.
So, Elena, on a related question, I've had, I know PSU, for example, has a great corpus available that they did, and I don't know if that's the case. When we try to use it or access it, there are so many barriers, and I don't know if that's the case with the data that you created and used, if it was like very IRB constrained to access it. Is there any way overall practitioners can have access to it to get examples, to get yeah, tell us more about that.
Well, the answer is not as encouraging as I would have liked.
I thought so.
Yeah. We are very constrained in, and we need to abide by the rules that they agreed us to work with. So definitely, I don't think I'd be able to distribute any piece of the ETS data. That's for sure. I don't know. I mean, for Iowa State, yes, it's still an internal corpus. It still is under restriction, but I don't know if, if we were to have, I don't know, start maybe a cross-institutional sort of initiative, that would require some thought, and then see what our IRB office might think about using data. So it's like you guys would be part of a project, and you would be like either co-PIs or experts or whatever, right? So if you could have that kind of access, I doubt there will ever be a way to make it open access. But if there's a new kind of initiative, whether it's research focused, like looking at that research with the purpose of producing materials, for example, maybe they would allow access to that data to external partners. That's a very interesting idea.
It's such a rich resource. I'm sure it was so hard and so labor intensive to create and to, classify and all that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Something definitely worth considering. If you're interested in continuing this discussion, let me know. Like we use, for example, I mentioned radar training in our, in the video that I made, right? So we train raters, and we take this very seriously. And I can, this is very fresh. So very soon, I think we will start issuing badges for our raters, trainees. So we'll have different, so like a micro-credential series, a badge would be for like a lower level, and then higher, and then we will, because we certify them, we have a very intense process of training, and it should be worth their time, and it should be something that they could put on their CV. A lot of our raters are graduate students, and this will definitely benefit their professional development. So that said, in our rater training, we use examples from that data, like video examples. But what we also do, and that's even more realistic and applicable to rater training, is every single test that we administer is audio and video recorded. So we have plenty of that data, which we did not get an IRB for because it's for program practices. And they told us, you don't need that. You're not analyzing it. You're just using it for pedagogical purposes, for training purposes. But we have lots of that. So, anyway, this is not the discourse in the classroom, but this is the discourse of ITAs who are about to enter the classroom, which is also, I think there's a lot to learn from there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
I have another quick question.
Go.
Based on your research, if there's anything missing from the ITA curriculum across the board, in terms of functional language, what do you think is missing that ought to be considered to be added to everybody's curriculum?
Yeah, that is a very important question, yet I think it's a bit difficult for me to answer without knowing other people's curriculum. And maybe I should have done
Yeah.
a little homework before today and look what other
Well, maybe
people are
not
doing.
with knowing other people, but if there's like, I hope that everybody's covering this thing, that students are missing, not curriculum are missing, students are missing.
So in that regard, I would say it would really be helpful to have that systematic approach of infusing functional language development regardless of levels of proficiency. Because we do things with language in different tasks, in different settings, right? So whether they're going to, I don't know, talk to their major professor and get some advice, get advice, right? So they will be needing the right functional language choices, right? Or if they're in the classroom and students ask questions on a topic and they need to explain, and they can use the different strategies to explain. They can be more metaphorical in explaining something. They can use some sort of association, making connections to, the real world knowledge that their students have to make it more easy for them to understand. But I guess, when somebody's developing a curriculum, it's not the goal of a curriculum is not to teach functional language, right? Maybe somebody would want to do that, but it's higher than that. But what I would hope when somebody develops or implements a curriculum is keep an eye open for how and whether and how this instruction and awareness of we do things with language. These are the things we do with language. To do them effectively, these are the kinds of language choices that are appropriate. So that's what I would say.
There was a question in the chat from Brenda. She says, what
Oh,
about holding first language grads to assessment? Is there any university where this is happening? Maybe this is like a question for everybody, but that's a really good question.
it's a very good question. Yeah. I don't know. Universities where this is happening. I don't know. Maybe we can open up for discussion here. What do you think?
I wanted to clarify the question a little bit. So first, holding first language grads to assessment, Brenda, did you mean that they should be assessed or that we should use them as assessors? I didn't really understand.
I'm sorry for the ambiguity. I've been working with at U of M, we call them GSIs, so I'm going to slip back and forth if possible. But I've been observing all GSIs, whether they're first language, second language, 10th language. And it disturbs me that we have not considered the GSI in the classroom. And we just seem to have come at what I'm going to call second language GSIs. And we are so focused on them that, and I'm now going to use a phrase that is not it's not infrequent to hear undergrads, especially in the hallways, the GSI from hell. And if you scratch beyond that, it's not a given that is a referral. And when you find out, if you can, it's not usually a second language person, because they have gone through extensive testing and courses and mentoring and taking feedback from their undergrad, students. And my question has always been, who's watching the other ones? And what are we doing about that kind of a comment? And what are we offering the students who are the recipients of this, overlooked creature? So I keep looking for a unit, a university somewhere across the United States where that issue has not been overlooked. And I have yet to find one. And I think we have a problem. Thanks for listening. I hope that clarified it and got rid of
Oh,
the
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. And Cynthia, thank you for asking for that clarification. I agree. The focus, and maybe it's because of the mandate. Like here, we have a Board of Iowa Regions mandate that ITAs must be tested, right, before they're placed in the classroom, and they must receive the language support they need because they're ITAs. Okay, but I agree, there's so many TAs that are domestic students, native speakers of English, who make sure that they perform well in the classroom, who make sure that the undergraduate students benefit from the instruction of those TAs. We don't have a program for that specifically, but we are thinking about it. So a year ago, Iowa State University has a center that's called Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, and I'm assuming so many universities across the country have similar kinds of centers. So those centers cater to the needs of faculty, tenure, not tenure, and as much as teaching assistants, whether they're ITAs or non-ITAs. Last year, the program that's called Preparing Future Faculty Program, which was under CELT, moved under my professional development area in the grad college. So with the leaders of the PFF, which stands for Preparing Future Faculty, we've been thinking about how we can include, be more inclusive in our teaching of teachers to cover that population as well. So what we started to do is orientations, like more expanded types of teaching orientations. Still Cell does a lot with like for all. They do a lot of things and open it up to everyone. I don't think I'm assuming there's a lot of similarity at other institutions. I am not aware of any assessment that would be an assessment of teaching effectiveness or whatever. I think in many cases, it's like in my department, for example, we have a course for our TAs. So they have to take a 3-credit course either before or concurrently with their teaching appointment. And that course it's a 500 level course, but that course is for all TAs, international and domestic. So I'm assuming in other places, maybe they have something similar, at department level or maybe at a center level. I know, for example, our chemistry department on campus has a orientation for their TAs before the start of the semester. So it might be that these practices are sprinkled throughout bigger and smaller units like it is at Iowa State. I don't think there is any formal assessment of that, though. I'm not aware of that.
It sounds very much, thank you, and I'll keep this short. It sounds very much like, what we have. And what it sounds as if we're all doing is we are offering orientation. We're offering courses, required courses within your field, but the word assessment is missing. And I think that I'm going to continue to find that big hole, but I hoping that maybe we can eventually equalize the treatment of future GSIs. So thank you very much.
I agree. Yeah, and I appreciate your thoughts too on this. I think this may be difficult now because I also wear this admin hat, and I'm exposed to different kinds of issues, including assessment, including language assessment. It might be challenging, difficult to persuade, stakeholders to introduce something like this at an institutional level. But there is research out there that does compare TAs who are domestic or let's say native speakers of English and ITAs. I know Tammy Slater and John Levis had a study and the reason I'm referring to that is because they also looked at the knowledge structure framework. So there's a lot of interest in that. I think in practical terms, yeah, the stakeholders who rule the show may not, I don't know, I don't want to speak for them or whoever they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are barriers to this.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that John Levis's name did appear here. You guys have quite a treasure. Thanks.
We do, and we take a lot of pride in that.
And if I may add, there's another population that is falling through the cracks, which is the international, whatever that means, students who are exempt, who don't need to take the test and whatever. Anecdotally, what I have heard in my institution is that whenever there's been a problem with an international student, it tends to be, or a complaint or whatever, it tends to be those who were exempt, the ones who had a high enough TOEFL score to not go through a program. So yeah, just wanted to add that other level of complexity there, and just not to make admin's jobs harder, but
yeah.
If I could just interject this,
Go ahead.
The exemption move and procedure gets very muddied. And here at U of M, the grad admissions department used to have an undergrad degree qualify in exclusively English medium university. And they had to raise the it to a 4-year undergrad degree in order to qualify for an exemption, because 2 years at an undergrad university really did not produce the fluency level. 2 years can be very easily spent in linguistic isolation. And so they raised it, and it now is based on 4 years in an exclusively English medium university, and Rackham maintains a list of those. So if you can find your university. So we have tried to deal with it. And yes, I totally thank you for including that.
And I think what I'm going to say now is somewhat related. And it would be related not only to students who are exempt from a speaking test, like ITAs, but other international students. So really broadening the range there. Here at Iowa State, we have a test that's called English Placement Test. And it has a writing component and an oral communication component. So the way it's worked so far is everybody, so again, there's that exemption layer. Whoever meets the exemption criteria and has a certain number, a certain score, then they're exempt, they're good to go, whatever, right? So they don't have a requirement. But those who don't pass the test need to take a placed in writing or a speaking course. That is in addition to what we have in the graduate college in the ITA program. We focus specifically on the on ITAs. That is for all graduate students. And the reason the English placement test is in place and active is because our graduate college has a requirement that's called English Requirement for Graduate Degree Completion. So to complete a graduate degree, they need to demonstrate mastery of written and spoken English. Now, I did, as part of another movement, which I don't need to go into right now, but this is a big thing happening here at Iowa State, looking deeper into this requirement. So I did a benchmarking analysis, and I looked at institutions, 32 institutions, including peer institutions for Iowa State. So out of the 32, only 7 universities have a test like this. There used to be many more. Okay, only 7 have a test like this, and no, I take it back. Only 7 have a requirement for graduate degree completion, this English requirement. Only 5 have a test, and of those 5, only 1 has a speaking test. Okay, so the landscape has changed a lot, and I agree with Brenda. It's very much driven by admissions and driven by the needs and wants of the universities to increase enrollment. And tests are seen as a barrier. And most of the universities that I looked at may have some English program support, others don't. Or at least they don't explicitly say on their website or whatever documentation I could find that this is what students could do. I was concerned years back when I established the Center for Communication Excellence. Part of the reason was that I was concerned about those students who are deemed as you're good to go, don't worry about your language skills, right? We could not make them take a course. But we started developing programming for students that is more flexible and in various forms. So that's why we developed the English speaking consultations model. I think I mentioned that also in the presentation. And we have peer speaking practice groups, and we have more like topic focused and not so much hands-on practice types of seminar series on different speaking and oral communication aspects. So we've seen a lot of success students who, if they're placed in English courses or if they're not placed, if they're exempt, they still come and seek that language practice and development.
I had a question about Iowa State's teach test. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role play test tasks. I really would find that interesting because really a lot of ITA exams are this micro lecture that doesn't really reflect the reality of the work that TAs often do, which is recitation courses. So I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Yes, I can. I will just make a little correction here. The role play is part of the OPI. It's not part of the teach.
Gotcha.
So the OPI has 3 impromptu questions and then the role play. And they get 2 minutes to think about and prepare to engage in the role play. So it's still with the rater.
Mm-hmm.
And after
But
that, it's the teach their presentation and followed by a Q&A. So our raters pretend to be undergraduates and ask questions of based on the presentation. So I don't know if you want me to tell you more about the role play
no,
or
that makes sense. That would be a
okay.
great opportunity for spontaneous language, which I think is really
Yeah.
valuable for these kind of assessments.
And it is
So
part of the general OPI. Well, at least when I was trained, it was part of this protocol for conducting the OPI. So there were the impromptu, and then there was also a role play. So at the time, I thought it's good. You know, it's another way to a more engaging kind of way to immerse yourself in a situation, give you a little time to think about it. We do give them 2 minutes to think about it, but I don't think actual does the OPI. I think it's more of a continuous interview style. Well, anyway, yeah.
excellent, thank you.
Thanks
So
for
we're
the
getting close
question.
to about 3, but does anybody else have maybe 1 or 2 final questions? Maybe somebody who hasn't asked a question yet, or somebody who has.
Do you use undergrads or grads as raters? Or, I mean, do you train undergrads or students?
We do not.
Oh, okay. The reason
Um,
I'm asking is that we run into a lot of, let's put it this way, linguistically challenged students who are not comfortable with anything that isn't Hollywood English. So I wondered if who you were, do you work with your students to give to rate, or are these experienced people?
Yeah, they're all experienced trained raters. They do teach undergraduate classes. So they are exposed to undergraduate students, not that that replaces the way undergraduate students would necessarily behave and the kinds of questions they would ask. But I will say that way back, I did try to get undergraduates to sit in the audience and listen. It's very difficult to, logistically to make that happen. We would have to have students who are in the discipline to be fair in the assessment. We would have to have students available and committed to actually showing up. So the whole operation of scheduling was practically not feasible, unfortunately. But I do see a lot of value in that. We do have our instructors. So, you know how I said that our ITAs who are placed in English for teaching purposes courses, our instructors, so they have specific assignments and they need to do something in class, but also out of class. And our instructors do go and observe their teaching in the classroom. This doesn't address your comment, but I felt like it's not completely inappropriate. I'm looking, there are more comments, and I'm sorry, I try to go between looking at the comments and trying to listen to you. Am I missing something? Well, thank you for all your warm, kind words. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Dr. Cotos. This was a great Q&A session. So today's presentation will kind of cool down. This was titled Research Grounded ITA Assessment and Language Development. A very special thanks to our presenter, Dr. Elena Cotos. Again, this recording will be available within 2 or 3 weeks after this event. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks for your questions. And hopefully we are inspired to move forward and maybe change things and maybe just do a really great job at everything. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me again. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you for your wonderful questions and contributions. If you ever want to continue the discussion, please let me know. Reach out. I'm here. Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
Friday and weekend. Enjoy your weekend.